Hello, my name is David James Francis. Recently, I've become aware of some great news, which I believe is important to share. It's important that people are educated on the subject I'm about to cover, and it's for that purpose that I'm making this video. There is a distinct lack of truth in the media, in our public discourse, so I'm about to lay a massive dose of truth on you. Much of what I'm about to say will be hard to hear. It will be hard to believe. Not that my words don't ring true, but rather because it's going to be hard to wrap your head around how you and everyone else have been so thoroughly and completely deceived all this time. So why should you listen to anything I've got to say? Why shouldn't you dismiss all this as the ramblings of an insane nutcase? I can assure you I am completely rational. But I believe it makes sense for me to first explain my qualifications and my history, so you'll understand how I came to possess the information that I'm about to share. To start at the beginning, I started off my life pretty lucky. I had good parents and I've got an IQ over 140. I'm not saying I'm the world's greatest genius, but I am saying that I'm no slouch in the mental capacity department, and I'm pretty good at problem solving. I also have an excellent and well-rounded education. My above-average brain got me into the University of Washington, and I studied there and a bit at the University of Oregon for 7 years. Why did it take me 7 years to graduate? Well, it was because I didn't really follow any one track toward getting my degree. I started off toward the business school, taking things like macro and microeconomics, political science and the like, but then I started taking classes in other things which interested me, such as history, philosophy, physics, psychology, astronomy, and archaeology. It was when I was at the UW when one day I had an epiphany. I knew, looking at all the long-term trends, which I could see us moving toward, that something had to be done to change direction. Every road seemed to lead us to disaster. From the perspectives of the environment, economics, and the hegemony of the U.S. and our worldwide perception as an evil empire. I wanted to light a fire under what I saw as the apathy of my Generation X, and show people just how vitally important it was to get involved and be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. My idea was to write a book, to outline the dangers ahead and inspire people into action. So I wrote Philosophy for the Third Millennia. Really, it was more of a progressive manifesto than a full-length book, but I intentionally left it short to make it so my lazy generation would bother to read it. There was no fluff in it. It was meant to be powerful and inspirational, and that's exactly how it came out. I wrote Philosophy for the Third Millennia in 1996. And after it was finished, I made about 30 copies of it and sent them off to publishing companies around the country. I wanted everyone to read it, and I was very excited about its prospects. Then one night I had an encounter with a man who told me at gunpoint that I was never going to publish that book. He stated that there was nowhere I could run to. No way it was going to happen. The lives of not just myself, but the lives of my family and anyone I ever cared about were jeopardized by this book. And he explicitly stated that I could live a long and happy life if I simply got out of the business of trying to change people's minds and simply remain quiet. He asked me if I understood and agreed to those terms, to which I replied I did, and I would do as he asked. Then he simply left. Well, as you might imagine, that experience left me somewhat paranoid. I kept going to school, but around that time I stopped spending time with my friends. I became quite a recluse, and around that time I got a part-time job working for the Psychic Friends Network, which I could do from home. I learned to read tarot cards over the phone with people. My paranoia led me to really want to leave Seattle, and I jumped at the opportunity to visit family in Orlando in 1997. Then I went back to school, but wanting to be out of Seattle led me to move to the University of Oregon, and that's where I finished my last credits for my degree in '99. After that, I moved to Orlando. I kept my head down, didn't stir the pot, I got married and had a family, but I did stay informed. I've always known that you don't get the real story from the mainstream media. I've always gotten my information from alternative sources. Some of them are credible, and some are not. It takes a certain amount of intelligence, research, and intuition to be able to determine which are which. I do believe I can. I started dipping my toe into getting involved again around 2006, which I volunteered for a political campaign. Since then, I've become steadily bolder, braver, and less concerned about what happened with the man in 1996. I started my own blog, www.davidjamesfrancis.com, on which I posted Philosophy for the Third Millennia for anyone to read. I've written songs like Torches and Pitchforks, Zombie Revolution, and Pussification of America, and I posted videos of me performing them on YouTube, and I spoke at and performed these and other songs at the Occupy Orlando protest. I have joined the Occupy movement and the active resistance movement. I no longer let fear dictate my actions, and I haven't for some time. So now that I've introduced myself and you know where I'm coming from, I'll begin to get to the heart of the matter. What I said earlier is that I have some great news that I want to share, and that's true. But before I can get to what that is, I need to set the stage. I'll be dealing with a lot of information and condensing it into a short video. As such, I'm not going to be able to spend a lot of time on explaining in great detail a lot of complicated concepts. I could do so, but others have already done better at that, and what I've done here is done the research, digested it, and I'm here trying to simply provide an overview. Please know that whether you choose to believe it or not is irrelevant to the accuracy of my statements. What I'm about to say is scientifically provable, is based on the best information available, and if you'd like to do further research on what I'm about to say, I'll point you in the right direction. If you find yourself disbelieving me, I'll invite you to do the research yourself and see if you can find where I went wrong. Please, though, don't listen to this with a mind toward finding fault with my words. Open your mind and just listen for a few minutes. Our country, and a good chunk of our world, is controlled either directly or indirectly by an evil conspiracy called the Illuminati. This group grew out of Masonic tradition several hundred years ago and has an ultimate goal of controlling all of the world's resources and enslaving its people. A greatly reduced number of people, because they intend to reduce the population to a more manageable level of maybe 500 million through wars and other despicable means. They control the mainstream media, they control the corporations, and they are the owners of the Federal Reserve. These people stay in the shadows, protecting their anonymity, but they are extremely powerful, and they are in fact very real. This group is truly guided by a psychotic worldview, and a great many people are controlled by them, if not by that shared worldview, then by the means of greed and fear. It is this group's control that has led the U.S. to do some very uncool things over the last couple of decades. The wars in Iraq were really about controlling the oil. The ongoing war in Afghanistan is and always has been about controlling and maximizing the poppy harvests. And they created the 9/11 tragedy to justify it. Those 3 buildings were imploded. 2 planes did not knock down 3 buildings, and there are thousands of other architects and engineers who agree with me. When Osama bin Laden died of kidney failure in early 2002, which was reported widely in newspapers in places like Yemen, Bahrain, and the UAE, they found a look-alike to carry on putting out messages, to be the great evil boogeyman and to justify the continued war. Bin Laden was himself a Saudi Arabian, and there are a great many ties between the Bushes and the Saudis. They have destroyed our electoral process in this country. First, by ensuring that our votes are counted on unreliable, hackable, programmable voting machines. The source code is by law the proprietary information only of those voting machine companies. And then, to ensure that nobody notices that fraud, they passed Citizens United, which allows for unlimited corporate and foreign money to be spent on our elections. Who's going to question any election where someone widely known to be a crook gets elected if that person or the representatives outspend their opponent by a factor of 10 to 1? The U.S. also has suspended the provisions of our Constitution which prohibit indefinite detention of American citizens without charges, through the passage of our recent National Defense Authorization Act. And it is this group that intends to start World War III by attacking Iran, which incidentally has nowhere near gained the capability of producing a nuclear weapon, despite what you hear over and over in the media and from the Illuminati-controlled Israeli government. These people really are psychotic, and really do intend to murder off over 90% of the world's population in their quest to ultimately win the game. Greed alone cannot explain how we've gotten to this point. The Illuminati and their conspiracy is indeed very real. So given that information, you might think that we're in a pretty terrible situation. It's so terrible you likely won't want to believe that things are that bad, that corruption has become so completely endemic. But those things are all absolutely true. Pretty much everything you hear from the media is some sort of disinformation or lie, which has most people living in a state which is really detached from reality. Now, these are things I've known for a long time, as I do follow current events very closely, and not through the mainstream media, but rather from sources where I can find accurate information. It is this group, the Illuminati, that I've been actively working at resisting. That's why I joined the Occupy movement. But I had resigned myself to our inevitable destruction, as these forces seem to me to be completely insurmountable. Clearly, the Occupy movement has been ineffective at creating any kind of meaningful change, thanks to being completely dismissed or ignored by the media and the brutal police crackdowns, which has really amounted to them getting away with completely ignoring the rage of thousands of people about all this evil seemingly taking over our world. I did say earlier that I had some good news, and it has given me reason to be optimistic about our future. It all started for me when I read about a lawsuit that was filed in U.S. District Court. It's case number 111CV08500JFK. Was filed on 11/23/2011. This lawsuit is very real. I have the PDF of it, and it is a fascinating read. But even more fascinating was an article I read by David Wilcock on DivineCosmos.com, which explained it and put it all in perspective. To summarize, there is an entity called the Dragon Family, or also referred to as the White Dragon Society, which is really comprised of an alliance of Asian royal families. For the last 1,000 years or more, China produced things like silk, spices, ceramics, and other things which became highly prized and valued in Europe. Over the centuries, a very large amount of gold ended up in China, as that gold was what they took for payment on these products. In fact, it ended up being about 80% of the world's gold. When Japan invaded China back in the 1930s, getting at all that gold was really one of their priorities. In order to ensure that gold's safety, a good lot of it was sent to the United States in return for bonds, which were issued by the Federal Reserve. It was decided that the U.S. would use that gold to back what would amount to be the world's reserve currency, as the dollar remains to this day. Basically, this lawsuit alleges that a lot of entities have interests in never allowing the Dragon family to cash in these bonds, and they have broken the law to prevent it. These bonds have been under Dragon family control all this time, as all this happened well before China became the modern communist People's Republic of China. These bonds are literally in thousands of trillions of dollars. The lawsuit only covers a theft of about $1 trillion worth. The other amazing thing is they didn't send all their gold to the U.S. They still have massive stores of gold, amounting to somewhere in the order of 5 times more than is believed to even exist on the planet. This gold is not in circulation. Its existence is completely secret, but that's one reason gold prices are so high. It isn't a secret to everyone, though. The cat is out of the bag. So, what's so great about that, you might ask? Well, I'll get to that. It just began with that article for me. Now, I found that article by David Wilcock so amazing that I ordered his recent book, Sourcefield Investigations. I didn't really know what to expect. So now before I go on, let me refer back to that book that I wrote in 1996, Philosophy for the Third Millennium. In that, I wrote a chapter entitled Dimensions. In that, I laid out my theory that time travel is theoretically possible. And it indeed is happening. Einstein understood that when you change the speed in a physics equation, you change the time. Now, my theory was that UFOs, commonly referred to as aliens, are really not alien at all. They're actually from our future. I added this chapter in because it fit in with the overall theme, which was aimed at getting people concerned enough to want to do something about it. Certainly, messing up our environment with enough radiation to cause humankind to evolve into these creatures is something which ought to be avoided. I always believed it was this chapter that led me to getting that visit from the man that night. Well, recently, this theory has been confirmed to be accurate. I don't say that it's confirmed because I found another crazy person who agrees with me. Now, I've recently come to understand the science behind it, and I can say for certain it is science, not science fiction. That, combined by consistent, reliable information from multiple, credible witnesses, has given me new insight into this new way of looking at things. This science has been proven by repeatable experiments and observations using the scientific method. Our conception of reality is truly flawed in a lot of ways. Modern physics has problems with dark matter and many other questions. This unifies it all. We humans don't tend to see beyond our own experiences. We see the world around us and think that what we can observe is everything there is. This new way of looking at things explains all of the things which modern science can explain. And then it goes beyond that to explain the nature of the soul, how people can have ESP or premonitions, or do other incredible things with their minds, and the power of prayer and meditation. This theory, which really explains everything, and is certainly the way the universe actually operates, is based on science, and it has been significantly, systematically suppressed by powerful interests for a very long time. This theory can be referred to as the source field theory. It is an energy, a wave that permeates the universe. And while we live in a world of three-dimensional space and one-dimensional time, often referred to as space-time, there exists another parallel dimension of three-dimensional time and one-dimensional space, which can be referred to as time-space. These two dimensions are in constant interaction with each other, and it is possible to cross into time-space, where moving forward or backward in direction will move you forward or backward in time when you come back. Humans can access this source field using the pineal glands in our brains. I could go on and explain in further detail about this concept, but it is extremely complicated and hard to explain to people who've never been exposed to it. And also, I really want to get on to the good news. There have been several crashes of time travel spacecraft over the past 60 years or so. One famous one happened in Roswell, but there are many others as well. The government has reverse engineered that technology and now possess many time-traveling spacecraft of their own. Further, the government had a program called Project Looking Glass. This contraption, which you'd probably recognize from the movie Contact with Jodie Foster, was a way to see into the future. They saw different possibilities, and with giant supercomputers, computed various probabilities that certain futures would happen. And they saw really there are basically two timelines, though each one had a great many variations. They began to refer to them as Timeline 1 and Timeline 2. In Timeline 1, we as a people get awakened to this new way of looking at ourselves and our planet, and descend as a species into a golden age. The other timeline, Timeline 2, is a world destroyed by war, where the Illuminati have succeeded in their evil psychotic plans to ruin our planet and gain ultimate power over an enslaved and desperate populace. The interesting thing is, though, that they found that these two timelines converged on one date, December 21st, 2012. Meaning that on that day, by that day, we will have decided which path will be the one we take. This corresponds with our planet moving into an area with a much higher concentration of this source field. Obviously, I'm pulling for Timeline 1. Well, here's the good news. I'm not the only one. It is certain that the Illuminati have gained what appears to be a nearly omnipotent influence over our country, corporations, and society. But there does exist its opposition. Now, I didn't know anything about the Dragon family until they made themselves known when they filed that lawsuit a couple months ago. But they have a massive and almost incomprehensible wealth and actively want to help humanity. Former Forbes magazine Asian bureau chief Benjamin Fulford has been acting as a mouthpiece for them recently. There are also a great number of well-meaning people who I'll refer to as white hats. These are people who have gone along with the Illuminati plans out of greed and fear to attain their positions of power and influence, but ultimately will resist them when it comes down to destroying the planet. I've heard it explained that it's as though there are two master chess players sitting across from each other. Both players are looking at the board, and both can see that checkmate is coming in 7 moves. At this point, each move has pretty much already been determined, and the outcome is really decided, barring any mistakes. Well, the white player has taken precautions to avoid any such mistakes, but the black player still has not given up. My point is that there is hope. Before I thought our situation hopeless, today I believe that we will win. I'm not saying that time is now is the time for complacency. Far from it. We can't just assume that someone else is going to do the fighting for us. But those are the stakes, and those are the opposing sides. And again, this is not science fiction, paranoid delusion, or my least favorite pejorative, a conspiracy theory. These are facts. This is the truth that has been hidden from you. This is what you need to get your head around now, because by the end of this year, all of this will become common knowledge. I can advise, if you'd like further information on the source field theory, to pick up David Wilcock's amazing, insightful, and thoroughly referenced book, Source Field Investigations. There are also a couple of really great and voluminous articles on his website, divinecosmos.com. You can also visit Project Camelot for more information. All of this information is out there, but it is so much information and such a complex story, you won't find it unless you go look for it. I haven't seen anywhere yet that put all the bullet points together to explain what is going on in simple terms in a relatively concise format. That's why I'm creating this video. I hope this video gets shared far and wide and informs a lot of people. I hope this news made you as happy and as hopeful as it made me to learn about it. And by all means, if you disagree with anything I've said, check your assumptions and look at the facts again. Do the research, and I guarantee that you'll find that every word I've said is absolutely true. The date is set, like they always used to say on the X-Files. So let's make sure it is a good day. While victory is within our grasp, the game isn't over yet. So maybe it's time you realized what team you're playing for and get in the game. It's time to get beyond all the wrong-headed influence of bigotry and intolerance and realize that we really are all in this together. Don't let the Illuminati divide us against each other. United we stand, and divided we fall. Thanks for listening.